The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is today, the 1st of December. Do you remember? Anyway, welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am in the studio. We are live and on the air. We are going to cover the news such as it is, but I want to first thank my sister, Anoa Changa, and I see Brandon Sutton got in on a show last night, or the after show. So thanks so much to the two of you for making it happen while I was out of town. I was in Chicago, and I want to talk about a little bit of what happened in Chicago, because I went on business, but then I also went on my other business, which is the show and politics and protest and activism. So I had a chance to talk to some pretty radical people there. Radical in the sense of stuff. I'll tell you more about it when I get there. But there's a lot of news happening. You can join the conversation as always, 857-600-0518 to join. Yeah, man, I literally just got off the plane and came straight to the studio, or picked up my kids and came straight to the studio. The kids are here. Hey, say hey to everybody. I don't know if you can hear. Okay, let's talk a little bit of news. So Donald Trump, I want to start with Donald Trump and Carrier. I talked about it on Tuesday night, but apparently I need to talk about it again. And again, I'm going to stop giving disclaimers. I don't like to talk about other content creators, but I have to. And this guy, his name is big enough. I'll go ahead and say it. I saw a video from Cenk Uygur the other day where he was giving Donald Trump props for the Carrier deal. And I get it. You want to be able to give, when somebody does something good, yeah, hey, let's say that it was good. But in the video, Cenk underplayed, or downplayed rather, the give outs, the handouts, what it was actually going to cost. And he focused on the fact that, 1,000 people are going to keep their jobs. Now, I don't want to be dismissive of those 1,000 people. Those are 1,000 real people with real families who are grateful tonight that they still have a job. So in respect of those 1,000 people, I will say congratulations. But what it cost for us to actually get that deal, that's the problem. That's what I talked about the other night. I talked about the fact that it is going to cost us. This is no type of victory where Donald Trump can just say, all I did was I threw down the hammer, I laid down the hammer, and they decided to keep their company here. That's not how it worked. And it was funny because even at his press conference today, he tried to act like that is exactly what it was. He said, any company that takes jobs from America is going to pay. No, Trump, that's not what happened with Carrier. Carrier CEO sitting in the back just laughing at your ass because they're like, no, we didn't pay, you paid us. Because that's ultimately what happened. Donald Trump worked out a deal with his vice president, Mike Pence, to cut Carrier a deal worth $7 million in tax incentives to keep 1,000 jobs here in the United States while they do export the remaining jobs. Now, we talked about this the other day, but maybe it was a little too soon, right? I talked about it on Tuesday, and it hit the news today. So maybe I was just a little too ahead of the curve. But the fact of the matter is, sure, we can probably incentivize every manufacturing job that ever left that actually is still in existence to come back to America. We can incentivize that if we get rid of all regulations, all environmental regulations. If we get rid of the minimum wage, and if we lower the tax rate down to Ireland type levels. If we do that, then of course we can keep jobs here. But that means that we would have corporations who some have revenues that are higher than the GDP of small nations. And if you combine like the top 100, they have more revenues than like the GDP of large nations. That would mean we would have those types of entities leeching off of our society and giving us nothing in return. They have no buy-in to the welfare of our society. They have no financial commitment to the welfare of our society. And so it just to me, this is not a victory. This is not something that you should champion and say, and maybe Cenk celebrated before. And this is not about Cenk, except the fact that it is, because that really struck a nerve to me, because I'm like, wait a minute, you of all people, like, you should have the insight and the keen eye enough to realize that these tax incentives are, even though on Tuesday we did not know what those tax incentives were going to be. On Wednesday, we didn't know. Today, now we know it's $7 million in tax incentives. So that's $7 million that is not going into the coffers of Indiana. And that generally means that $7 million that's going to be pulled from everywhere, like education, infrastructure, any type of, forget social safety nets, right? So you're pulling away from critical systems in order to incentivize a corporation to stay and keep 1,000 jobs. If that's how Donald Trump is going to get this done, then in 4 to 8 years, what you're going to see is a deficit like we've never seen before. The complete evisceration of any programs that is part of discretionary spending. We're going to see the plunder of the public good. Man, that should be a title. Copyright, trademark, 2016 Benjamin Dixon Show. The plunder of the public good. That's what we're going to see. And you got Paul Ryan sitting in the winds, because this is exactly the type of, I can't cuss tonight, guys. My kids are here, but it really does warrant some profanity here. This is the type of crap. No, I don't even want to say that, because I definitely, Ben, don't repeat me. This is the type of shenanigans that Paul Ryan lives for. They have this lucid dream of a society that has no public good, and they take rugged individualism to the logical or illogical extreme, in which you don't have any subsistence, any support from a government. Every man for himself. This is what they honestly believe. Mind you, there will still be taxes. There will still be revenues coming into the government. They just don't want those revenues to go to any individuals. They want it to all go to corporations. And this is exactly what Donald Trump has done. And he's taking a victory lap, and the media is helping him with the victory lap. I mean, is anybody going to fundamentally dissect the logical problem with doing this type of deal with every corporation that we want to keep here? What do you do when Mexico says, okay, we're going to incentivize you with $14 million of local tax incentives? It's a race to the bottom. That's how Ireland has gotten stuck with some of the biggest corporations, tech industry in the world, and they get eviscerated in terms of tax revenues. 50 euros on a million, 50 euros on a million. That's not sustainable in the long run. What it does do, it is these people are like drug addicts. They just need a quick fix. to get past the next fiscal quarter, right? They need to get past their next earnings report. This is what corporations do, and this is exactly how the government is now enabling this addiction. Because as long as they can make it look like they're growing, corporations, as long as they can make it look like they're growing the economy, then we're not going to pay attention to the long-term factors. The only time we're going to pay attention to the long-term factors is when a Democrat is in office and they're actually doing something to reverse those long-term trends, because they are actually the fiscal conservatives in the conversation. Republicans are fiscally liberal, but they're liberal in the sense of they want to give it all away to corporations. Democrats used to say, let's give it to the people. Now they're saying, no, let's be fiscally conservative. Let's make sure that we don't scare or spook the markets. We want to make sure that we tap down on inflation so that investments can have the same weight and we don't lose the value of our dollar over time because of inflation. We want to make sure that we create and foster an environment that's good for economic growth. And by economic growth, they mean growth of corporations. That's the Democrat line. Republicans, that used to be them. Republicans now are like, let's cut the taxes from 35% down to 15%. Oh, don't worry. We'll make it up. We'll make it up somehow. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the fact that it's going to add 10 trillion to the deficit. Don't worry about that, because if you cut taxes, it's going to increase revenues. Ta-da! Anybody praising Donald Trump on this carrier deal, I don't have a word for you. Shield is not strong enough. To call you dumb would be not below me, because I'm pretty much, you know who I am. But anyone who's praising this deal with carrier and Trump, I'll just say you're highly misinformed or disingenuous. Or you're too busy, too quick, ready to find a way to say, oh, I have a way that I can actually say something good about Trump, and at the same time say something bad about Obama. It's a twofer. Still love you, Jank. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. I would love for you to join the conversation and tell me what you think about some of these things. So we're going to dig in a little bit deeper with that story as calls come in, because there's some fundamental flaws. We can pretty much make some predictions of what it's going to look like in about 4 years. God forbid he has 8 years. We can tell you what this world, what America's economy is going to look like, because we've seen this before. We can predict what 4 years from now is going to look like because we've seen this before. We've seen what happens when you cut taxes so low that you are plundering the coffers, and then you have to go back and raise taxes again. We saw that. We saw that in the 80s. Matter of fact, the cover of the USA Today said that this was going to be tax breaks that were Reagan-esque. And they are quite literally gearing up for it. And I told you guys, how many times have I said this? The only thing Republicans want to do besides find a war so that they can reward their defense contractors, the only other thing they're interested in are tax breaks. Not tax breaks so that they can, quote unquote, stimulate the economy, because we saw, even with the Bush era tax breaks, we saw that there was still a pent up economy. We saw, even with the Bush era tax breaks, even after that, there was still $2 trillion of cash sitting in banks that were not being used to invest and to, quote unquote, stimulate the economy. Because it does not follow. Every single time you cut taxes, the automatic response to it is not necessarily investment. Can they invest the money? Sure. Have we gotten examples of where they did invest that money? Not in recent years. So it's this one single play that Republicans have always had and have always used, and this is all they're doing. And it's amazing to me that out of everything this election was about, all this about the repudiation of the establishment, Donald Trump is coming in as the king establishment player. And I told you that too. 1, 2, 3, 0. There we go. Okay, couldn't get logged in. I knew, and I knew for two reasons. And I don't want to regurgitate them again, because I know if you're listening now, you've probably been listening for a while. I don't want to regurgitate them again, but I did say two reasons Donald Trump is going to be a pretty typical Republican is because, one, he's feckless in terms of governing. He has no experience, has no organization, has no structure, had no infrastructure, had no team sufficient to go in and to operate without the help of the GOP establishment. He completely 100% could not do that. I told you that was what was going to happen. That's exactly what happened. Two, he's not going to do anything against his own best economic interest. Speaking of, I mean, this conversation is going to dovetail nicely into the conversation about identity politics, and I'll show you how in a minute. Donald Trump is not going to do anything, one thing that's going to hurt his bottom line. And everybody's like, oh, well, he's made all of his money already. He doesn't need to make any. I've never met a rich person who didn't want to be richer. Only people who are satisfied with what they have are poor people who have zen, who have found their center, and they've learned to abase and to abound, and they're just calm, right? Those are the only people who don't want more money. I've never seen a billionaire who said, yeah, I think I have enough. I think I'll stop there. Doesn't work like that. Donald Trump, just because he's a billionaire, that should be the red flag to let you know that he wants more. You don't become a billionaire by not continuously wanting more. It's just are their headphones on, Snug? It's just your poor ass that doesn't want more. And you look at Donald Trump and say, oh, he's got so much, so he doesn't want any more. No, that's your way of thinking. I've never met a rich person who is not hungry for the next dollar. That being said, Donald Trump is not going to do anything to harm his bottom line. And so when I say he's going to act like a typical Republican, I said that not only because he needs the Republican Party to help him because he didn't have an infrastructure, the knowledge, the know-how, or the experience to transition to the White House on his own without their help, but then two, because he benefits from their economic policies just as much as anybody else, just as much as some neoliberal Democrats, and which we'll talk about them in a second. So, I mean, that's where we are. So Donald Trump makes this victory tour. And what did he ultimately get? He saved a couple thousand jobs. All right. And again, I'm not going to downplay that. That's not nothing. That is something to the people whose jobs he saved. However, there were a lot of jobs that were lost anyway. And the price that it costs the state of Indiana. All right, enough about that. Let's talk a little bit more about Donald Trump's economic policy. We discussed this. So we haven't quite pinned down exactly what he's going to do. But if who he is appointing is any inclination, if who Donald Trump is appointing is any inclination gives us any inclination as to what he's going to do, it does appear with the appointment of Mnuchin, Steve Mnuchin, that he is going to go with the biggest tax cuts, trickle-down economics, Reaganomics that we've seen on cocaine, on speed. So based on this appointment and based on what Trump has already said, He's looking to reduce the tax brackets to flatten them from 7 brackets to 3. So he says, this is a quote from his speech at the RNC. He said, our current tax code is so burdensome and complex that we waste 9 billion hours a year in tax code compliance. My plan will reduce the current number of brackets from 7 to 3 and dramatically streamline the process. The top tax bracket would be those earning $189,301 to whatever, to infinity. That's a big gap. Someone making $183,000 a year, they're doing good, right? A couple making that amount of money, they're doing good. For them to be paying the same tax as someone who makes $8 million a year, that's far from a progressive tax code. That is how you institutionalize wealth inequality for generations to come. So he's removing the carried interest loophole. And he didn't discuss this at the Republican National Convention this summer, but he discussed it recently. They're even considering, to pay for these tax breaks, they're considering closing the mortgage deduction. Now, that is one of the few things that your average middle class family actually has to help soften their tax burden. So in order to pay for these tax breaks that he's going to give on the income side, that he's going to give to the top 1%, he's going to get rid of reduce the mortgage deduction. I remember I don't remember, I was too young, but I recall vaguely when I became aware that Ronald Reagan, there used to be a time where you could deduct your credit card interest. Did anybody remember that? Like, there was a time where whatever interest you paid, you could deduct that from your taxes. Ronald Reagan came in and with his Ross-Kemp tax cuts of 1981, got rid of that. And so now 35 years later, we have Donald Trump coming in, say he's going to go for the final death knell. He's going to go, not only we haven't been able to deduct our credit card interest rates for the last 35 years. He said, I'm going to one-up you, and we're going to limit how much of your mortgage interest you can deduct. Or your mortgage, not just mortgage interest, your mortgage that you can deduct. All right, so anyway, let's on personal income taxes, Donald Trump plans, he stated, quote, these reforms will offer the biggest tax revolution since the Reagan tax reform, which unleashed years of continued economic growth and job creation. One day we'll have a conversation about the difference between fiscal policy and the boom bust cycle. There are presidents who get to take credit for booms. And they take credit for booms even in the midst of them doing tremendous tax cuts. And so we see this correlation with Reagan because there was growth after these tax cuts. We draw this correlation and say, oh, it was the tax cuts that did it. And then you generate an entire school of thought that says if all we do is cut taxes, then, okay, we can stimulate economic growth. I think it was JFK who, I guess between 60 and 63, that was all the time he had to do it. He brought the top marginal tax rate down from 91% to 75%. And his justification was very similar to what Reagan said in the 80s and what Donald Trump is saying now. He's saying that there is a loss of productivity. There's a loss of investment when we tax your top tier income at 91%. Make sure you understand we're not taxing, and I'm talking to you, the audience, we're not discussing a broad stroke of taxation. We're talking about marginal tax rates. So I don't know what it was in the 60s, but I'll give you an example. Your first $100,000 would be taxed at 35%, and your anything that you make over $1 million would have been taxed at 91%, right? So not your first million. Your first million isn't taxed at 91%. It was your $1,001,001. So that dollar over $1 million was taxed at 91%. All right. So JFK was really one of the first people to actually make that argument that if we cut the taxes, then we can unleash some economic growth. Well, it makes sense, right? If you are taxing people at 91%, the top marginal tax rate, that there's potentially some investments that could be made if we reduce that to 75%. And we did, and we saw some economic growth. Ronald Reagan came in some years later, 20 some odd years later, and said, let's do this again. Actually, let's do it and do it even further. Let's go from 71%, I believe, down to 31%. My number's a little foggy, but that's how draconian of a cut it was. And he cut it so low that shortly thereafter, he had to raise taxes back. I think he cut it down to 25% and then had to go back to 31%. Either way it goes, that's the type of cuts that happen. And it put the nation in such a bad fiscal position that while 1988, George H.W. Bush argued, read my lips, no new taxes, when he got into office, he realized we're going to have to raise taxes. And he raised taxes, and that's how he lost. I said all that to say we've seen this before. And we've seen this when we were at 91% on the top marginal tax rate. And we've seen that, yes, if we have 91% top marginal tax rate, then yes, we could see an increase in productivity, and not in productivity, but in investments, and then we could see some economic growth from that. But we've seen where we dropped it down so low to the point where it's not sustainable, so we have to take it right back up. Donald Trump is offering to do this, but not only on personal income taxes, but on corporate taxes. He is saying that the solution to the problem, to the economic problem, is for us to reduce. We're not at 91%. We're not at 75%. We're not at 65%. We're not at, for corporations, we're at 35%. And he's saying that we're going to reduce that tax code from 35% to 15%. Now, you have to ask yourself, what is going to be their effective tax rate? Because even at 35%, they found ways to get their effective tax rate to nothing. GE got a bailout, paid nothing in taxes. Or was that General Motors? General Motors got a bailout, paid nothing in taxes. So they have the way. So this is what we're going to see. An explosion in the deficit. I would venture to say that we're not going to see a boom in the economic growth because the underlying factors, the tax code is not the problem. The tax code is not the reason our growth is stagnant. The reason our growth is bulimic is because the middle class doesn't have any disposable income. Because every penny that we are 75% consumer economy, every penny that we make is going to survival at this point. It's going to rent. It's going to pay for childcare. It's going to pay for clothing and food. It's going to pay for all these things that in college, right? And it's the ambitious people who are getting screwed the most, because if you aren't and you didn't go to college, or you had an ambition that didn't require you to go to college, then you're not saddled with this debt that is draining the life out of everyone. That's why the economy is growing so slowly. Not to mention the fact that we are a mature economy, and 3% is about the best that you can expect from a mature economy. You're not going to see 3% on average for an economy our size and our age and in this stage of development. So what do? We're going to cut taxes for corporations. Here's the deal. They don't want lower taxes. They want zero taxes. Look at what they've done in Ireland. Look at what they did. They take their money, use tax inversions, and keep their cash on paper overseas so that they don't have to pay taxes to America, and they'll pay taxes to somewhere like Ireland, who will allow them to pay 50 cents on or $50, 50 euros on a billion euros. They don't want lower taxes. They want no taxes. And when you say you want to pay no taxes, that means you want to have no buy-in, no responsibility whatsoever to the society from which you generate your wealth. That's like that's like a husband and a wife team where the husband is able to go and make all the money in the world because the wife stays at home and takes care of everything at home, and she's not able to go generate money because she's at home making money. She's at home taking care of the house so the man could go out and make all the money. That's like him coming home and saying, I think you should pay half the rent. Like, wait a minute. How are we in this? How does this benefit us? How does it benefit? Oh, the jobs? No. You need those jobs. You need to hire us, right? You're not going to hire us unless it's going to benefit your profit, your bottom line. So you're not doing us a favor by saying, oh, we're giving you jobs. No, we're doing some mutual favors. Yeah, you're giving us some money. We're giving you our labor, or we're giving you our talent. And if you didn't have it, you would not be making these profits. So don't talk to us about, oh, we're doing. No, the jobs that you create are only there to generate profits for corporations, period. That's not your contribution to society. And we've let them get away with this type of thinking for so long, when in reality, if there was a general strike, every one of these corporations that depend on our labor will crumble. So who's doing who the favor? The bottom line is this. Get ready for a wild ride, because we are getting ready to experiment with some of the lowest tax rates we've seen in a long time. And I'm going to take advantage of every single one of them, because my little corporation ain't saving the world, can't save the world. So I'm going to take the tax breaks just like everybody else. But we're going to see in 4 years the deficit begin to explode like we've never seen before. And it is amazing to me that Republicans have zero concern whatsoever about the deficit when they're in office. But it's all that matters in the world when Democrats are in office. The Democrats' problem is they're too dumb to realize that they should be the counterbalance to the insanity that is the Republican Party. The Republican Party is totally okay with collecting some taxes so long as whatever we collect goes to corporations and their business buddies. The Democrats, all they want to do is let's be fiscally responsible. Let's make sure that we tap down on inflation. Let's make sure we don't spook the markets. We want to make sure that your portfolio looks good. That's what they. Meanwhile, their constituents are like, we ain't got no portfolio. And now Trump, this is how convoluted this year is, and the next 4 years is going to be. Now Trump has circled back to grab the people who would have been Democrat if the Democratic Party was populist anymore, but they're not. And Trump has said, I'm going to save you jobs. I'm going to punish these companies, and we're going to get these jobs back in America. And how does he do it? He does it by saying, here's all the tax incentives you need. Never mind that they're, broken schools in Indiana. Never mind all the problems, the infrastructure in Indiana. We're going to take $7 million of those dollars so that we can bake you up real good. We can lather you up real good, Carrier, and you keep these jobs here for us. I really just have to ask the question, like, who played who in this situation? Donald Trump is running around like he was the man, but Trump, you really kind of got bitched. You kind of got cucked. 857-600-0518. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hello?
Yep, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Oh, my name's Ricky Velasco. I'm often irritating you in your comment section. And I would just like maybe in your next segment tomorrow you to bring up H.R. 5732, which Congress just passed, which is a no-fly zone in Syria. And when I was reading some of the bylaws, I saw a lot of things that suggested that the president, according to 1702 and 1701 of, I forget which bill, that the president be able to claim and then buy at a set price that our government would assess all essentially liquid gases or power sources that exist in that region.
Okay. Will do. Thanks for that recommendation. Thanks for the call. 857-600-0518. Anyone else wants to join the conversation? I'll pull that article, that amendment up, HR 5732, and we'll talk about it tomorrow after I get a chance to read it. Yeah, so the phone lines are open. I had a picture of Mnuchin up there. Basically, Mnuchin is Donald Trump's muse to get these Reagan-esque tax breaks done. And man, all I know is that I don't think we're going to be able to recognize, I hate to keep saying this, but y'all about to see how much of a greater evil Donald Trump really was on the policies that we weren't even talking about, really. Like, I mean, I was talking about it, but wait till you see what's done to the economy. You're talking about wealth inequality. Wait till you see what's done to wealth inequality when a household who's making $183,000 a year pays the same tax rate as someone who's making $8 million a year. You know? And when there's only subtle shades of differences between what someone is making at $80,000 a year and someone who's making $180,000 a year, wait till you see the type of, you cannot address income. First of all, let's put it here. They're not interested in addressing income inequality. They actually have studies that they've sponsored that make the case that income inequality is a good thing. So just so we're clear, like, we're about to see just how much of a greater evil Donald Trump was, particularly on economic policy. And if you take a look at his his pick for the Secretary of Defense, it's a good possibility that we're going to have problems on the international front, right? Everyone had this deluded idea that Trump was not a hawk. Really? Oh, goodness. Oh, my poor friends, my poor friends. Donald Trump is whatever the opportunity needs him to be. And that is a classic con man. I don't even want to talk about it anymore, to be honest with you. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, it's Yak from Maryland.
Hey, man, how's it going, man?
It's going. Yo, I just wanted to reach back a little bit in what you were talking about Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Ireland's even in a better position than we are if we decide to go down their route because they're a net taker from the EU. We ain't got nobody.
Right. Right. Good point. I didn't even think about it that way.
We screw it up for ourselves.
Yeah.
That's all we have, man.
We're here out here by ourselves. Ireland has an entire union, European Union around them, supporting them, taking from them, so they can afford to do this. They can afford to do these tax breaks, and we simply cannot compete. The bottom line is this: either we are going to put corporations in check and make them understand that they have a responsibility to society, or corporations are going to put us in check and makes us understand that they don't owe us a damn thing. Who's going to win? Well, over the next 4 years, it's going to be the corporations. Thanks so much for the call, man. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. Obviously, Yeah, that thing got me. And people are celebrating this carrier deal. Like, woo-hoo, look at Trump making America great again already. No, Trump got bitched. Yes, their headphones are on. Trump got cucked, like legitimately. And then he gets on stage and acts like he did something. I wish I had that clip because he was talking with his, when he gets his raspy voice, like, any company who does not keep jobs in America is going to pay. He was like, I guess he had been talking all day long. He had this raspy voice when he was saying it. And I'm like, no, you don't realize you just opened up your checkbook and bought those jobs, kept those jobs here by paying them. I don't know. Anyway, what else is on my list of things here? All right, let's talk about his foreign policy, because other people really thought that, hey, well, he's not going to be hawkish. At least he's not going to be hawkish. Well, this gentleman on my screen tells you otherwise. So Donald Trump is going to nominate retired Marine General James Mattis as his Secretary of Defense. He is a retired four-star general known as, quote unquote, Mad Dog. He was lauded for his leadership in the 2004 Battle of Fallujah in Iraq. So he met with Trump at his New Jersey golf club last month, and Trump said that Mattis gave him a new perspective on waterboarding. So Trump wants to waterboard because he heard it somewhere on the news, and that was a good way to get information out. Mattis said, no, I don't need waterboarding. All I need is a pack of cigarettes in a room. We don't know what else is going on in that room, but he said he doesn't need waterboarding. So at least we could say maybe waterboarding is off the table, right? So, but I mean, there's been thousands of years of torture that's been perfected that did not include waterboarding. I don't know that torture itself is off the table with Mad Dog. And this is his quote. He said, quote, I've always found, give me a pack of cigarettes and a couple of beers, and I do better with that than I do with torture. Mattis was going to require a waiver from Congress in order to be confirmed. There's a decades-old legal statute that bars service members from quickly entering civilian positions, which would otherwise prevent Mattis from being eligible. So, I mean, that's pretty standard. He's quickly coming from the military, ranks of the military, into political service. He is rather hawkish, to say the least, right? And I think that we can't, I don't want to say overestimate. I don't think we can overstate Mattis's worldview. Here's some other quotes that I'm pulling from Vox. He said, General Mattis said, quote, it's a hell of a lot of fun to shoot Taliban fighters. He also told Iraqi leaders that if you F with me, I'm going to kill you all. He accused the Obama administration of being naive for creating the nuclear deal with Iran that will slow but not end Tehran's path to a bomb. That's from Vox.com. So, yeah, he's not big on torture. Okay. But he seems to be big on opposing this nuclear deal with Iran, which Donald Trump is also big on opposing the nuclear deal with Iran. Because it lifts the sanctions, all the sanctions except of America's, right? And it does give Iran a path to a nuclear bomb, but instead of 1 year, it gives it to them in 10 years. It essentially, and I've heard somebody say this before, and it made so much sense, and I wish I could credit the person, but it's not my idea. But it's essentially seeing that if in 10 years Iran can be a good actor on the international stage. And by good actor, I don't mean benevolent. What I mean, a good citizen in the international community. A good citizen meaning they're not a sponsor of terrorism. They're not they're not perversely violating human rights. And I put perversely there, obviously, because every other nation we deal with just about violates human rights. But, for Tehran, they're going to have to, not so obviously do it. They're going to have to be a international actor who wants stability. And that's the bottom line. Stability versus regime change versus fundamentally changing what the global order looks like. Anyone who comes into the international stage and they want stability from where we have it, we deal with them. That's why we deal with Russia. That's why we're not going to war with Russia. That's why the Red Scare was unnecessary, was ridiculous, but also empty. We're not going to war with Russia. Not because Donald Trump's in office now and Hillary Clinton's not in office and Hillary Clinton wanted to go to war. No, it's because Russia wants the same stability that the United States wants. We just have some issues, some edge issues that we have to resolve, namely Syria. But ultimately, the oligarchs in Russia are just as happy with the status quo structure of the international order as the oligarchs in the United States. They all smoke cigars together, and they all drink their expensive liquors together. I was going to say Louis the 13th because that's expensive liquor to me, but I'm sure they got some liquor that's probably cost, instead of $150 a shot like Louis the 13th, they probably got some liquor that costs $10,000 a shot. So, just got to put into context. I might not even know what expensive liquor is compared to these people, but they want status quo. And this is what we were betting on with Iran. Our only option of completely removing their capacity to get a nuclear weapon was to destroy all of their facilities, to destroy all of their technology, which requires war. So if we're not willing to go to war, then we have to do something to make sure that they don't get a bomb now. Because now they are not a status quo nation right now. And I'm circling all the way back to Donald Trump and Mad Dog Mattis, right, in their worldview. But we had to do something short of going to war. And what we did was we bought ourselves 10 years to see if Iran was going to come into the fold, out from the cold, and become a status quo nation on the international stage. That's about, honestly, the best that you can do short of going to war with them. Now, while everybody was like, oh, Hillary Clinton wants to start World War III, which the no-fly zone was threatening, potential, had that possibility with multiple steps in between, right? You don't go from, oh, we're going to do a no-fly zone, all of a sudden nuclear war, right? It doesn't work like that. But while everyone was complaining about that, and thinking that Donald Trump was the answer to that because Donald Trump wanted to have good relations with Russia, every single candidate, every single person, every ideology always has the other and the enemy. Hillary Clinton at the last second in the election made it Russia. Shame on her. It should never have been Russia, right? Donald Trump consistently through the election made Iran and China the enemy. He made China the enemy on trade. He made Iran the enemy on brute force, conflict. And so he's bringing in a general who has a hawkish position towards Iran. I don't even know what to tell you. I can't say that I'm going to predict that we're going to be in a war with Iran, but I will say if Donald Trump tries to use the force and the power of the United States economy and the office of the presidency to reinforce the sanctions that our allies have taken off Iran and to put that back on Iran, then that subsequently will neutralize the Iran nuclear deal. which means Iran is like, well, okay, let's build our nukes now instead of 10 to 15 years from now, which means we are going to have to use military force to stop them. And Donald Trump has hired the one man who has that in his head all along, who has had that in his head all along. I feel like clapping myself. So what? Is it okay? Because at least we're not going to war with Russia. That's what I want to find out. Who's okay with this? Who's okay with this? And I'm asking my audience. I'm asking my audience and anyone else who's just here trolling. Who's okay with this? Who's okay that, oh, we're so glad Hillary Clinton, and yes, I am to a certain extent. I'm rubbing this in. I'm rubbing it into everybody, me included, right? Because I would not effectively. No, I did. Let me stop lying. I did, and I took a lot of heat for it. I did argue against the anti-lesser two evil isms, right? I argued that ad nauseum. I always believed and told you that Donald Trump was the greater evil, and people love, oh, Ben, you're a corporate shield. And I said the reason he's a greater evil is because he's going to do exactly what Hillary Clinton's going to do, and he's going to do it on steroids. And this is exactly what he's doing. All right, let me get off of my I told you so tour. Because it is what it is at this point, and it's in full motion with the y'all remind me I'm going to do my best not to keep saying I told you so, but he's got a unified government behind him. So who's stopping him? This is why I find it so funny when people are like, no, don't talk about his tweets because he's trying to distract you from what he's really trying to do. Why does he have to distract us? He's got the House, he's got the Senate, he's got the Supreme Court, and he's got the White House. He's going to do exactly what the hell he wants to do. There's no distraction needed. Oh, but he's doing some things that are corrupt. He needs a distraction. Okay, as soon as he does it, we'll, call him on it. But there's not going to be any impeachment proceedings when he's got the House, the Senate, and this is Donald Trump's ship now. You, look at me. Look at me. This is my ship. This is Donald Trump's world now. And he is shaping up to be a neocon and he's being worse than a neoliberal. Worse in the sense that he's taken neoliberalism and said, that's not, you ever watched Tim the Two Man where Home Improvement, where the hacksaw was perfectly good enough to cut down a tree, right? And this is Donald Trump. He looks at this hacksaw and says, this neoliberalism, this is good, but I'm going to soup it up. And he comes back with this bastardized version of a 10-foot saw that destroys everything around him. That's what he's going to do with everything we've been complaining about, neoliberalism. That's what Donald Trump is getting ready to do to our economy. And I'm just going to sit back over the next 4 years, and I'm going to be playing my fiddle while Rome burns, because there's nothing. What can we do? Unless he does something so egregious, so horrible that even Republicans have to sign on with impeachment. What is he going to do? If he does something criminal, the Secret Service is going to be there, that they're going to be there to kind of cover it up unless it's uncover-upable. There's no stopping Trump. There's no stopping Trump. It is, I'm not saying it's the end of the world. I'm saying it is the exact onset of the world that Paul Ryan has always wanted. That's what I'm saying. And in many ways, that's much worse than an apocalyptic scenario, because it is more difficult to come back from, because it's subtle. It's like now, right? There was a time we actually cared that the working class doesn't make enough to actually live and to send their kids to college or to trade school. There was a time where that was an issue that we as a nation felt compelled to address. Now, we don't think about that. We simply say, you're lazy. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't make the right decisions. We bought into meritocracy. We bought into it, and the entire world has shaped so much, or been reshaped so much, that we don't remotely have the conversations that we had before Ronald Reagan became president. Donald Trump is in the position to do that all over again, and there's nobody there to stop him. Politically. I mean, you can go riot. Sorry, you can go protest. You could go march. You could write your best think piece. You could do your podcast and rant about it, get 1 million clicks. You could do all of that, but there's nothing to stop Donald Trump except Donald Trump. Because as long as he keeps doing these, going down the road of being hawkish towards Iran and being a hyper conservative fiscally, and by conservative in this context, I mean modern conservatives, Ronald Reagan conservative, not a Milton Friedman conservative. He's going to gut the coffers and essentially flatline the, no. He's going to essentially set the precedent now that corporations don't have any responsibility to America. That's what he's doing. Well, I was going to say that's what he's done, but he hasn't done it yet, but it's coming. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. Oh, actually, it's already, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was this late. Thank you. And I have my kids. Good night.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.